Hello and welcome to Football 301. Very, very fun show for you today. A special show. Not just because we're talking about the Beefy Boys, the offensive linemen, which I'm always a de facto member of, honorary member of. Get to talk offensive linemen as we continue our prospect series for the 2025 NFL Draft. And I'm doing it today, talking offensive linemen, with my dad, Mike Tice, former head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, longtime NFL assistant, coaching offensive line and tight ends. Also played tight end in the NFL. Dad, coach, Mike, how you doing today? Thank you for joining me.
Pop.
Pop. According to little Jack. Yeah, pop. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Everything's great. How you doing, Nate?
I'm doing very well. I know we're in the same town right now, opposite sides of Vegas. You are in the south side. I'm in the southwest area. But no, anyone that doesn't know who Mike Tice is, not just because we have the same last name, we actually are related. I try to keep that on the down low, just in case if anyone wants to make any jokes or anything. But want to flaunt it today because my dad, this is kind of his thing. This is his forte. And a longtime offensive line coach, a longtime evaluator as well. Just been around the position a lot. But I always think it's really interesting, Dad, as kind of a way to introduce yourself too. You played tight end for 14 years in the NFL. Vikings, Seahawks, Washington. You played quarterback in college at the University of Maryland. Anyone watching on YouTube right now sees the Terps gear. I got Mariners gear. It's Sweet 16 / opening day. So we got it covered on the other sports. But you then went straight from playing right into coaching in the NFL under Denny Green with the Vikings. You were a player, then a tight end coach. After your first year as a tight end coach, he then moved you to coach offensive line, something you never played, something you were kind of just there because you were a blocking tight end. You kind of had some stuff, some credentials as a blocking tight end. Can you just talk about what that was like what was your first reaction when Coach Green was saying, hey, you're coaching offensive line, and what was the process you did to kind of learn the position?
Well, it's a great question, and it was a great start in the second year for my career. Keith Rowan left and went to the Oakland Raiders. He was our offensive line coach. And when he left and went to the Oakland Raiders, obviously that left a hole in our staff, which was the offensive line. I particularly wanted to stay in the passing game and become an offensive coordinator or a quarterback coach because of my background. I said that to Denny, and Denny looked at me and said, I don't have a quarterback job open. I have an offensive line coach job open. Do you want it or don't you want it? And I, of course, said, oh, yeah, I want it. And about an hour later, he came back and said, oh, yeah, by the way, that's a $100,000 raise. I said, I love coaching the offensive line.
Didn't he give you a little short list of who he wanted you to study and kind of like look after? Do you remember those names?
Well, not so much, Nate, study and look after. It was who he wanted me to go talk to. He wanted me to go talk to Chuck Knox. He wanted me to talk to some of the great offensive line coaches of Joe Bugles of the world, both guys I played for, and talk to them about, how do I get this thing started? Of course, I watched the offensive line drills. I was able to work with the offensive line as a blocking tight end. So I was familiar with some of the footwork and those things, but, not putting together a group was a little bit discerning to me. It was my first time putting together 5 guys and, of course, backups. And so it was quite a challenge, but it was very rewarding when we played well.
Yeah, it usually is. Winning usually cures all, as you always told me. But no, I always thought, too, because you weren't an offensive lineman, and maybe, of course, I'm going to have some bias here, but really just anecdotally being around it, I thought that maybe not being a quote-unquote O-line guy as a player or an offensive lineman, you were able to kind of look at it maybe from a different perspective and maybe look at the big picture in a little different angles. And I can say that with, 2 feet on the ground and really say that with my whole chest because I feel like that's very true. What are some of the kind of things that you think you maybe looked at differently at O-line, or maybe what are some of your thresholds for the position that maybe you've latched onto and found that are really indicative to success?
Well, that's a great question, Nate. The first thing that I tried to do, and was successful with it, and had a very long list of Pro Bowl centers. The first thing I did was try to teach my centers coverage. So they knew which way the problems were coming from in the course of the game based on rotation of the safeties. being in the passing game, I'm not a prolific receiver, but being in the passing game at quarterback and tight end, I was able to learn coverages, and I was able to teach that to our centers, the Jeff Christies, the Matt Burks, not Olin Kreutz in Chicago because he was already a Pro Bowler when I got him, but Rodney Hudson, another one I had in Oakland. Yep. So the other thing I looked at was, what were the moves that gave offensive linemen problems? And it was always that secondary move where an offensive lineman set to a guy and the guy went inside quick. So I call that, obviously change of direction, lateral quickness. Those were important traits for offensive linemen to have. And then the last thing I did that not everybody agrees with, but I see watching college tape, some guys do it. I wanted my tackles to set back square. I wanted them to dictate to the defensive end or the pass rusher that, okay, I'm setting square. Which way you going? A lot of times when you turn and get perpendicular to the line of scrimmage, you're going to allow that defender to go inside because you can't stop moving and you can't retrace your steps quick enough. So I always taught my tackles to set square.
That makes a lot of sense. And you even see there was a guy this year, Cam Robinson. He was with the Jags. They traded him to the Vikings, and they taught different techniques. And you could see how that really messed with him midseason. So that's interesting too, with the angles and everything. We're going to talk about a lot too with these players, because this is kind of the draft class it is, about maybe moving positions and thresholds for testing and what you look at to move those positions. So I'll kind of save that conversation for that when we talk about those players. But even this is kind of something I want to reemphasize. You just mentioned centers. And if anyone's listened to this show or my previous stops, I don't shut up about centers because I say what a boost effect that has on the rest of the offensive line. Do you think, how important, maybe this is how I'll lay it out to you, how important do you think a center is to having a good offensive line? I know the answer, but I want to hear you kind of explain it, because I think the quarterback center communication aspect of modern football is kind of still underrated, I think, from the public and from maybe the common fan. Not to knock them down, but I think there's more into it. So maybe talk about how important a center is to an offensive line to solidify the rest of the offensive line.
Well, Nate, not even just a center to the offensive line, but a player that's in the middle of an offense or a defense or a basketball team or a hockey team. You're only as strong as you are down the middle. And you have to have a strong center that can lead, that can change protections, that can make sure everybody's on the same page when the quarterback audibles to a better play or another option. Centers are very, very important, especially when it comes to getting everybody on the same page of protections.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, all right, I hope everyone's strapped in, because we got about a dozen guys we're about to go over. Guards, tackles, maybe a projected center in there as well. But we're going to take our first break, and then we're going to come back with my dad, Mike Tice, and we're going to evaluate some prospects. All right, we are back. And how we structure this is, again, I looked at the Athletics consensus big board, where they take everybody's big boards and then make a consensus. It's exactly what it sounds like on the 10. So that's how we'll be going in the ranking of the orders. I made one little switch at the top just because I wanted to talk about this guy first, and that's Will Campbell, offensive tackle / offensive guard from LSU. He is number 9 on the consensus board. He is 4 on my last big board. And just to set the table, he was a true freshman starter for LSU, a younger player, played left tackle at LSU, seems like a very good head on his shoulders, very aware player. But now the big discussion, if anyone's been paying attention to the draft, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? He measured in with 33 inches or just below that, depending on what you're going to go with. And really, I would start, Dad, what are your thoughts on Campbell? Do you think he can stay out at tackle? And do you have arm length thresholds that you look at to stay out at tackle? Or what do you look at for a player to stay out at tackle?
Well, he's 33-inch arms. I certainly wouldn't want to have a tackle that has 31 and change arms or 32 and low change arms. But I think he's okay if a team feels like he could play tackle. I think he would be okay to give him a chance. I mean, he's a longtime starter, has received some excellent accolades. He plays tough. He plays hard, obviously smart, does a lot of pointing and making sure everyone's on the same page in protections. He's a good player. I like this player. And I don't say he's a necessity or he's a must to move inside. But if people feel like he doesn't have long enough arms, then have at it.
What do you think some of his strengths are, Campbell? And do you think how would you rate him overall? Would you rate him as a first rounder, a top 15 guy, top 20 guy, a guy that you'd be more comfortable later in the draft? How would you rate him overall? And what are some of his strengths?
Well, first of all, his strength is that he's played a lot of football. And playing a lot of football is something that you can't take away from an athlete. So he's played a lot of football. He plays with really good aggression. He appears to be intelligent. You don't see a lot of mental mistakes on film, but normally your left tackle shouldn't make many mistakes because most of the time it's block the guy in front of you. You're on an island. Yeah. So block that guy. So he's got good, solid change of direction. He's athletic enough and he's sudden enough if teams wanted to move him inside where things happen a lot faster, as we all know. I think he could make that change. But I could see him sliding over to the right side and competing on a team that's doesn't have their tackle positions fulfilled or they're not happy with their tackle positions. I could see him doing that, but I think he'll overall he's definitely a first rounder in my opinion. But I think overall, this is going to be a good player for a team for a long time.
Yeah, what I've kind of come with Campbell is that maybe he can't stay out the left side. When you were saying the right side, you were saying right tackle. Right. I kind of look at him as a term I've kind of come to as best five enabler. Like he allows you to get your best five offensive linemen out there in some way, shape, or form. So maybe that is maybe the strength for me. Would you maybe lower a guy that you're like, oh, this guy's a guard tackle in a pinch? Maybe a guy, would you have him lower than a guy that's maybe a tackle only, but of the same ability? Like, how do you weight the versatility?
The versatility is key, Nate, especially to a team that might have some doubts about the players they have at multiple positions, which is a lot of Patriots fans.
A lot of Patriots fans are like nodding their head right now.
And I think, the one thing I question on him is strength. And I don't know, when I look at my notes, I have strength ? A number of different times. So, that is something that comes into play when you're talking about moving a guy inside. It's hard to be a finesse guard in the National Football League nowadays with the size of these defensive tackles that are in the league.
Yeah. And last question with Campbell before we move on. Any comments on his stance? Do you have any issues with it, or is that just fine for you? Because he has kind of that bird dog stance where he's standing straight up kind of thing. I have no issues with it, but I was just curious if you did.
Well, how can I comment on the stance when I coached Randall McDaniel? And
who had the funkiest stance ever.
Randall had the funkiest stance ever. But, that's something they teach, and certain coaches teach that. My concern is if you're that erect, in order to gain leverage, you got to drop your weight. And so you just, anytime you're wasting time or wasting movements, it's not a good thing when you're an offensive lineman.
Yeah, just extra fat and with the movement and everything. But all right, so that was how we want to start off, because actually this guy has risen up the ranks. He rose up my board. I have him 5 overall. He is 8 on the consensus board. That's Armand Mbow from offensive tackle from Missouri. He lines up at right tackle mostly, or all the time. Does move around some big sets or some jumbo sets or whatever to say, tackle over sets, I should say. My big question for you with Mbow, first off, what do you think of him? Do you rate him high? And do you think he can stay out at tackle? And do you think he can switch over to the left side? Those would be the main questions I have for you.
Well, first of all, let's talk about what I see as his strength. He's got excellent change of direction and agility. So if I'm putting on my notes that he has excellent change of direction and agility. I would say that he's athletic enough to take a look at on that left side. He's really good sets. He's got excellent foot fire in the run game. That means that he doesn't stop his feet on contact like some other players that we're going to talk about here in a minute do. And he uses his arms extremely well. He extends his arms and keeps the defenders away from his body, which is an excellent thing to have as a tool and a technique getting into the NFL when there are so many great athletes on the edge in the National Football League.
Yeah. Would you say, I feel like when he's on the outside zone concepts or when he is reaching on the outside, that's like his weapon or his strength. Do you think he is a good fit for other offenses maybe than just zone offenses? And when I say zone offense, I'm thinking, the Shanahan, Kubiak guys. Do you think he's a fit in all types of offenses? Maybe the question I should ask.
I do. He is excellent on the outside zone, as are a number of these players that we're going to talk about here today.
College football. Gotta love it.
Yeah, but again, with the comment that I had about being agile and being athletic, I think that puts him in a good way where he's going to be able to get out of space, get out there on some of those wide receiver screens in the open, in space, being able to redirect on smaller athletes. I like this player. This player, I wrote on my notes, I am a fan.
Okay. Would you have him, just to start, we'll go one by one and start kind of slotting these guys. Would you have him ahead of Campbell? And
yes.
you can look at it, we can rate it as just O-lineman overall maybe, and then we can get to maybe position breakdowns from there. Okay, so you have Mbow above Campbell. I'm starting to lean the same way. Do you have maybe this one blemish with him? Anything on play strength? Do you think he has good lower body strength, or is there anything he needs to improve in that regard? I know you're looking at your notes. Do you still use yellow paper, by the way? Do you still use the yellow legal pad? Oh, okay.
No, but I still use a pencil, though.
I have my whiteboard on here. That's all I do.
And obviously, for your fans out there that know me, I can't put the pencil in my ear when I'm wearing headphones.
It's not number 2 pencil. It's a number 3.
Yeah, because I'm ADD and I press hard on the pencil.
Snap them off. So,
I was looking at my notes today. And I do have a couple questions. Occasionally I question his grit, or I should say, his finish, which is the same thing as grit. I question that a couple of times. And the other thing that I talked about, smaller defenders tend to give him a little bit of problem. Now, if that's the case, when you're thinking about, do we project him over on the left side? If he's, according to my grades, my notes, if he's struggling a little bit with smaller defenders, that means he's struggling a little bit with quickness. And so where all your elite pass rush is going to be, they're going to be on the left side. So that might be something that could be a deterrent when you're talking about moving this guy over to the left side.
Yeah, I've really, he's grown on me. He's a guy that I think the 49ers should be drafting at 11 because I think he could be the right side and then maybe move over for Trent Williams when he moves on, finally retires at whatever age he's going to do that. No, I'm a fan of Mbow too. I kind of have been looking at it the same way. I have him and Campbell kind of tiered the same near the top of the draft. That's why they're up there on my big board. We'll move on to the guy that is 16 on the consensus board. I'm a little lower on this guy than I think you are, so I'm excited to talk about this. This is Kelvin Banks, offensive tackle / offensive guard, as you hear the notes getting ripped up. Offensive tackle, offensive guard from Texas. And Kelvin Banks, Jr., I should say, highly rated guy, has been up here on a lot of the boards throughout the season. There's some questions whether he's a tackle, he's a guard. I actually think he's more of a guard. But when we talked about him before the show, you think he's a tackle. Kelvin Banks from Texas, Dad. What were some of your thoughts? What were some of his strengths? And why do you think he could stay out at tackle?
Well, he's athletic, Nate. And you could just see that, okay, Texas runs as many wide receiver screens as I've seen on tape or I've seen in the course of the season. He is absolutely excellent out in space on these wide receiver screens, or what I call flanker screens. He does a tremendous job in space. He does little things right. little things that I've taught over the years. When he's up the field on a defensive end and the defensive end tries to come back underneath, he does a great job of coming down his stem and redirecting. He's able to maintain contact with these athletes, with these superior pass rushers. There's just a lot of athletic things that he does. He's a good finisher. He's got very good, I didn't say okay, because a lot of times I'll say decent, okay. He's got very good change of direction. Without a doubt, he's athletic enough to play outside. It's a shame that some people don't like him, but I think he's moving up a little bit, Nate. I think people are taking a look at the overall group and seeing, wow, this guy is a little bit better than I thought, and he's a little bit more consistent, and he plays with a good motor and a very good technique.
Yeah, no, he does play with a good motor. I don't know why it is, but I just have envisioned him as a guard, but maybe because this is the term I keep going back to, and I don't know if it was even you that used to say this, but he has the ass of a guard. And I don't know how else to describe it, just the frame, and maybe that's why I've stuck with him as a guard. I thought sometimes when at tackle, some stuff got him edgy, especially using his hands, and maybe this is just me having high expectations and being hard on him. Did you thought his hand usage was good and everything, and be able to use his length, to stay on the outside?
Yeah, Nate, there's a couple comments I have right here in my notes. Very good arm extension. And what I mean by that is he's playing with the defender away from his body, and he's keeping the defender away from his body by extending his arms. This allows him to redirect or change direction on that secondary move that's always going to be coming from those great edge rushers that there are in the National Football League.
And so you think you stay out at left tackle? You would give him a shot there?
Okay. Absolutely.
No, that's good to know. All right, so on to our next player. Actually, where did you have Banks, dude? Would you have Banks above Campbell or below Campbell?
I would have Banks, Nate, above Campbell, and I would have him right around where Membou is, right around there. But as we get talking here, I have another guy that I would have above Campbell as well.
I know you do. I know you like this next guy coming up, who is the number 20 player on the consensus board, also number 20 on my big board. I get double points or something for that. But this is Josh Simmons, offensive tackle, Ohio State, a transfer from San Diego State, has been with Ohio State a couple of years now. Really one of the most improved players in college football, I thought, throughout this year. And then he popped his patella tendon against Oregon. Yeah. But a very fun player, very athletic. He did do some on-field stuff at Ohio State's Pro Day this week, which is very encouraging considering his injury. But Josh Simmons, Dad, when you checked him out, what were some of your thoughts on Simmons? What were some of the strengths? And I think there's not even a question that I think he could be a tackle. So I'm not going to do any positional moving here. But what did you think about Simmons?
Yeah, I liked him, Nate. I was able to watch those early games. I think the first 6 games he started. He very smooth athletically. Another player that's really good on those wide receiver screens out in space. He's a good, solid finisher. I didn't really, I always look to see how guys finish, and we'll talk about a few guys later on that don't finish the way that I like to see them finish. But this guy does. This guy plays with aggression. He's, like I said, he's a very smooth athlete, good, solid sets. You can tell he's been well coached. I like this player. I like this player a lot.
And yeah, and a true blindside protector too, like a true left tackle type. But we even talked about before the show, but what was one thing that you maybe in the run game that really stood out to you when watching Simmons? Just maybe a strength of that game, especially on the backside.
Well, he does a great job on backside B blocks. He does a great job when there's a bubble and he has to get to the linebacker, go through for the linebacker. He's athletic enough to get up to those quick and athletic linebackers that he'll see in the National Football League and that he saw in the Big Ten too. But here's another note I made on him. He's another player, Nate, if you're talking about playing tackle, that plays with his arms extended and continues to keep that defender away from his body. One of the things you look at in college players that you don't see at a high percentage is great hand use and great arm extension, because working on technique is something that they run out of time in the college. They don't have time to work on all those little intricacies that we can work on in the National Football League. And this young man and a couple of the other players do a nice job of using their hands.
Yeah. What are some of your hand placement drills? You do. Don't you have the multi-hit one? The 1-2?
Yeah,
1-2, 1-2, 3?
I use a lot of sled, a lot of 5-man sled with a lot of different combinations. I actually also use the goalpost with the pad on it to start practice every day and have a combination, whether it's 5 hits with the right hand, 3 hits with the left, 2 hits with the right hand, combinations. And all that does, Nate, is gives those offensive linemen a chance to throw their hands and not place their hands, but it also gives those offensive linemen a chance to replace their hands once their hands get knocked off by these defenders, because the game has changed. There's a lot of hand fighting in the game today.
Right. It's more of a speed game, as opposed to maybe brute force and everything. If he were healthy, Simmons, where would you have him stacked on this board?
Oh, I'm looking. When I look up, I have a board of my own right
here.
So
Yeah.
I would definitely have him ahead of both the two guys we've already talked about, LSU, Campbell, and even Membou. I'd have him ahead of him because this is a left tackle. And so I would have a true left tackle. I would have him ahead of those two young men we talked about previous. Yeah.
And that's what's funny is so people listening are probably going to be eyes wide, ears wide listening to that. And just wait. There's another one coming. So I don't want to spoil it too much. What would you say weaknesses with Simmons other than his knee exploding in the middle of the season? Any weaknesses with him?
Yeah, there's always going to be a weakness. And let me just say this also, Nate, and this is the big one for me. This young man can sink his hips and flip his hips. And what I mean by that is when he's working on the backside, if he has the agility to get his hat across, flip his hips, and wall the defender off from chasing down the run from the backside, not every offensive lineman can do that. But we have a couple we're talking about today that can, and this is one young man that can. His weaknesses, occasionally I question, and that's every player. Occasionally, I question their finish. Sometimes they tend to want to watch the ball fly down the field and not go to the ball in case there's a fumble and, finish through the whistle. I'd like to see some of that a little bit better with this young player. And again, a couple of the other players that we're getting ready to talk about as well.
I'm glad you talked about his grit a little bit, or the fact that he does try and finish at least solidly, I would say, because some people have knocked him for that. And I didn't agree with that as far as maybe the public takes on that. I'm glad we got to highlight. He stood out to me. I really like Simmons. Obviously, I have him as a top 20 player. That he stood out to me a ton because of what you just highlighted. The backside blocks I thought were exceptional. The cutoffs, the getting to the linebackers, all that stuff. And he was strong enough to be okay on the front side. He wasn't getting pushed back and driven back. So I'm glad you highlighted too that he's a true left tackle type and not a projection or anything. He's done it. He's done it at a high level and against good competition. He did. So glad we got to highlight Simmons a bit.
Well, against great competition. When I look through my notes, and yeah, I know you know this, but I'm saying this for your fans out there, is if I continually repeat myself, whether it's something good or something not so good, then that's something that really stands out to me. And there's not a whole heck of a lot that I wrote on there, Nate, that I don't like about this young player. I continue to say he's athletic, he's smooth in space, he can run.
Mm-hmm.
This guy can help you win football games, and this guy can help the quarterback set his feet and step up into the pocket and make those throws that he's got to hang on to the ball a little bit longer for.
Not a lot of 320-pounders move like this. I'm total agreement with you. I'm high on them too. Next up, though, we're going to go inside, and there is no talk about position here. This guy is obviously an interior offensive lineman. That is Tyler Booker, guard from Alabama. I'm not going to lie. I went into this process going, this might be your type, but there might be some things that aren't your type because I know you like size at the position, at all positions, as do I. But Tyler Booker, what were some of your thoughts? He's 29 on the consensus board. I'm sorry. I have him on my big board at 22. Not going to lie, I'm going to drop a little bit. Saw those testing numbers. But with Booker, what do you think of him? What are some of his strengths? Maybe some blemishes as well.
Well, first off, he's got one thing that like you said, I always liked, and that you can't teach and you can't coach, and that's size. This is a very large man, as are a couple of the other guys we're going to talk about later. This is a very big man that takes up a lot of space and can eclipse the sun with his girth. This guy is big. He plays at a high level, Nate. My biggest concern on this player is the quick twitch. I don't see that explosive movement laterally that you're going to need in the National Football League on some of these defensive tackles that can start out on your outside shoulder and get to your inside shoulder before you blink. And so that's going to be a little concerning for me in pass protection. Of course, in the run game, he can get down the middle of somebody, cover him up. And the one thing I would say, this is not an explosive player. I don't see him getting into a player in the run game and knocking him back 3 or 4 yards, which really doesn't happen a lot. I mean, that's a myth. This is a National Football League.
It's not all pancakes. It's not a pancake every single play.
No, he's not. He's not playing against
duplexes every play.
Yeah, he's not playing against a couple of my jockey friends. They're not little people.
Right.
They're
Mikey
big,
Smith and Gary Stevens playing linebacker.
Billy Clinky. Here's my flaw on this young man. He makes contact in a run game, and then he settles his feet, and I call it he wants to wrestle. He wants to sit there, use his size, use his girth, and cover guys up. I'd like to see a little bit more foot fire like we talked about with one of the previous players from Missouri, and I'd like to see him with a little bit better foot fire, a little bit better aggression, if you will, when he gets into a player. He's a solid finisher. I don't have a lot of knocks on this guy, except the fact that I don't like the fact that he wants to wrestle with players once he makes contact with them. I like to see him finish. Now, you could teach that. You could get him to finish better. I'm looking at it. He does a nice job in his sets. He has good vision. He does a nice job when there's a defender coming from the second level on a dog. He sees that. He doesn't miss that. He's been taught well. He's got good footwork in the run game. And again, I just keep going back to, I'd like to see a little bit better foot fire on contact and see him use that girth and that great size that he was born with. I'd like to see him use that a little bit more efficiently.
How do you, and so you think his recoverability is maybe just iffy? Just his ability to maybe second reaction maybe is just a little iffy.
He's not a quick twitch guy, Nate. And one of the things I put down in my notes, which is significant to me, he's not very nifty. Yeah. And there's no finesse in his game. And at times there needs to be finesse in your game. You need to show your athleticism. You need to show your recoverability if you're going to play offensive line in the National Football League at a high level.
Right. And you actually had one comment about him that I thought was interesting. Before the show, we were talking about Booker a little bit. You said, I actually would prefer him in a pass-heavy offense. And can you maybe just expand on that? Because that's not actually what I would have thought originally, but I get what you're saying. But could you expand on that a little bit, that thought?
Well, because of the fact that he is big and because of the fact that he displays good footwork in the run game, I think he'll be a really good one-on-one pass blocker against a big three technique. He's not going to get bold. I mean, let's face it. He's not going to get bold. He's going to be able to keep the inside of that pocket firm because of he's got that extra girth, that extra size, that extra rear end, and that he's going to be able to sit down. And it's really going to be helpful, in my opinion, to a team, and there are a number of them out there right now that have a shorter quarterback that needs to have that firm A-gap to A-gap so he can see down the field.
Right. I know Dolphins, and, he's not a great fit for the Dolphins because they're a Shanahan scheme. So I don't see him in a zone system. With the team that comes to mind for me is the Bengals, because they need some guard help. They just need trench help, period. But where would you be? That Bengals are picking in the teens. Where would you be comfortable taking Booker in the draft, I should say?
I would be comfortable taking him either early second round or real late first round. I don't see him in the teens at all. But that's just me talking.
No, I was just curious. That's what I've kind of come to too. Is he's not a fit for everybody, but there's certain teams that I like him better than others. But it's also you got to be comfortable. You got to be. I don't know. I consider guys being scheme proof. No matter what you drop them in, they can contribute. Like Simmons, we just talked about. Like those are the guys I prefer. All right, we're gonna get to one more guy here before the break, and this one I'm very excited to talk to you about. That is Josh Conerly Jr., tackle from Oregon. He is 32 on the consensus board. He's 31 on my board. Josh Conerly Jr. though, Dad, what'd you think of him?
I love him. He was my number one guy.
Overall,
I
just
think
period. O-lineman one.
Period. Number one offensive lineman in this draft for me. Again, I don't do it full time like everybody else does. I was given this special assignment, so I'm doing this special assignment. But
family favor.
I didn't get a chance to look it up, but whoever's the O-line coach at Oregon has done a tremendous job. This kid plays with great technique in all areas of the game. Pass sets, run game, out in space, footwork, down blocks, hand usage. This guy has a lot of traits. When you have that many good traits, you're a first half of the first round player. You're because he has so many good traits. That to me makes this guy a premier offensive tackle in this year's draft. I really like this player. There's not a lot to not like about him, unless he's got some blemish or some acne that I don't know about.
Dude, so I would say originally at the beginning of the year, the first month of the season, and I think the games I maybe shared with you were more as the season went along. So this is great. Is the first month of the season, I would say, and even last year when I first evaluated him, is maybe some lower body strength and core strength were more fine than good. And I thought he could get moved sometimes and maybe just get, bumped around a little bit and maybe just not be able to stay on his blocks. But I thought as the season went along, he improved tremendously in that regard. So that was, do you have a blemish or anything with him that maybe you're like, okay, maybe this is one other side of the coin with Conerly? Because I do think he improved in that area.
Yeah, he gets a little bit narrow in the run game at times. I think that's something that he could continue to work on. Dave, when I look at my notes, everything is good on the backside, good pulling on the edge in space, great usage of his. Great usage of his arms and hands and protection. Here's another guy that gets his hands and plays with his hands out in front of him, which is going to allow him to not get edgy in the National Football League when you're playing week after week against great edge pass rushers. And let's look at the two games that I did. I did Ohio State and Penn State. He's not playing against the Little Sisters of the Poor. He's playing against some of the elite edge rushers in the 2025 draft.
Mm-hmm. I know. That's why I gave you those games, because I wanted to see what you thought about those two. But no, I'm with you. I've been bullish on him throughout the process. So it's kind of like, it's nice to hear someone else kind of seeing that. I loved his footwork. Like I thought his feet, he had typewriter feet, but they weren't just the light feet with no weight behind him. It wasn't like he was just tiptoeing. It was actual weight behind the quick feet and everything. Is there anyone that he reminds you of? I've been trying to figure it out. Like I can't figure out it, because who he moves like, but he's not exactly the same player, is Marshall Newhouse. But I think they that the light feet, the kind of typewriter feet, on chop. I think, no offense to Marshall, who's a friend, I think Conerly is a better player. But I did. Is there anybody that you coach that maybe reminds you of? I'm just putting you on the spot here, but there's somebody he reminds me of, and I can't figure it out.
Yeah, he's a guy that is smooth. Again, my hat's off to the coach because he does a lot of things really, really well. And down the left side at the end, I ran out of space on this because I wanted to try to keep everything to one page. But when you put down here, good footwork in the run game, good on down blocks, good to the second level. That means getting up to those nifty linebackers, and very nifty pulling. He's able to go around piles. I just don't know how you can hurt yourself drafting a player like this.
No, this is great. I love this because I think he's a good player too. So Alik Terry is the offensive line coach for Oregon. I believe he was an assistant defensive line coach for your guy. He did defense in the NFL first, then went back to Oregon. For the Vikings, Patterson, Andre. I think he was. I'm guessing. I'm looking at the timeline, so I think he worked with him for a year or two. So, I think if I have the timelines right, but I've got to check them out. So shout out there to Oregon. We're going to take our next break. Yeah, the Ducks. I know I'm high in a couple of Ducks. Conerly, and then they have a defensive lineman, Derek Harmon. Two guys I've been bullish on throughout this process. So it's kind of nice to see them getting some more love. But no, I love that, Dad. We're going to take our last break and we'll come back with a few more prospects for the 2025 draft. All right, we are back and my dad's chomping at the bit. So we'll get to the next guy. We'll go with Gray Zabel. Offensive lineman, I'll just put it at center, guard, however you want to project him, played tackle this last year in college, but has played all four spots other than center in the NFL. I, along with others, like him at center. You might have some comments on that, which I'd like to talk to you about, but he is 34 on the consensus board. I'm right around there, I believe, on him. I have him at 30 on my big board. Zabel, what'd you think of Mr. Zabel? I should say from North Dakota State, Dad.
Well, this young man and a couple of the guys coming up that we're going to talk about is a guy that is going to help you win football games. Figuring out where he's going to play, I think, will be the easy thing. He's got versatility. You could tell he's a leader on the field. He's a great finisher. He's got tremendous quickness. He's got grit. I really like this player. He played some good football. Moving him inside. Well, I think he would be best served inside. And what I would do, but again, I'm retired. I would move him inside to left guard, and I would work him as the backup center constantly, like we did with Matt Burke when we moved him inside from Harvard. And then I would just see how that transition plays out for him. And it took us 3 years before Matt Burke started at center for us in Minnesota. But he was a true left tackle at Harvard, an excellent athlete, just as Zabel is. And I actually think, well, Matt's going to get mad at me, but I think Zabel's got a little bit better engine than Matt did.
Oh, what do you mean by a better engine? Just kind of like motor? Like just like real finishing?
Yeah.
Harvard guy.
I'm going to get in trouble. Yeah,
I think Matt's got his hands full these days. When you're moving a guy inside, like you are looking at moving it, you're like, hey, I like this guy better at guard. Are there thresholds for testing that you look at, or is it just more of a movement ability kind of thing that you look at?
Well, if you're going to move a guy inside, in my comments, he has to have the comment of very good change of direction. He has to have the comment on my sheet that says explosive, or it says sudden, a sudden player, because things happen, as we all know, a lot faster inside than they do out there on the edge. So you got to be able to change direction. You got to be able to get from, say, 18 inches to your left all the way back to 18 inches to your right in a second. Sorry, I hit my camera. In a second.
Okay. And the producers are so used to it for me by this point. So
yeah. So that suddenness, that change of direction, or that lateral explosion, as I used to call it, you have to have that in my comments if I'm going to project a guy to move inside, and this guy has that.
No, that's great. Yeah, because he got some work at center at the Senior Bowl, and I do think people project that. But I do want to, and sometimes I get ahead of myself going like, oh, just move him to center, and forgetting that that's a long transition, especially for a rookie. And maybe seeing some guys this past year do it well as rookies has maybe spoiled me. Graham Barton with the Bucs, Zach Frazier with the Steelers. So I maybe have gotten spoiled with some centers taking over. Even Rodney Hudson, though, was a tackle in college and tested like one of the worst athletes ever. I will say that about Rodney, but moving into center, he had, the good quickness and he was a little bulldog in there along with the smarts. So another guy that bounced around because of an injury to Josh Simmons, his teammate, that's Donovan Jackson, 28 on my big board, 35 on the consensus, played mostly guard before bumping out to left tackle after Simmons' injury at Ohio State, kind of played half and half this past year. What did you think of Jackson? And what do you think about his versatility? What do you think of him at guard? And do you project him at guard at the next level?
I do project him at guard. And whether it's because of the fact that he started out at guard and then got thrown to the Wolves after the injury, he looked a little shaky in the games that I watched 3 games on him. A little shaky at tackle, not as confident. It's almost like, oh, I really don't want to be out here. You could almost feel that. But boy, he played a lot faster, with a lot more aggression, a lot more confidence when he went back inside, when he started out inside early in the season when Simmons wasn't hurt. And I like this player, Nate. I think this is a can't go wrong player. Again, unless he has some kind of injury or some kind of personality problem, this kid, and I'm not putting that out there saying he is, I'm just saying unless he has that. Yeah. I'm saying unless he has that, how do you miss on the player like this? This player is going to be a good player in the league for quite a while.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have him in my top 30. He's kind of grew on me. It was actually the tackle tape that made me more, the later tackle tape. I gave you the game, Penn State game, which was his second start at tackle. As he continued at tackle, it made me more bullish on him at guard, actually, because I was like, oh, you actually, look at you move in space. You're actually even better than I gave you credit for. I'm totally with you. I think just the size, the pedigree, the starts, the length, like just everything that he has, the athleticism, I'm like, yeah, like with you, that I think this is just a very good guard prospect. So would you have Zabel and Jackson ahead of Booker, Tyler Booker from Alabama?
I would definitely have Jackson ahead of Booker, because you're
more of a flavor thing.
Well, because you speculate, because he hasn't played in there. Well, at least you're saying he played 4 positions, except for center. I didn't see any inside tape on him, so I don't know. But he didn't play against the same type level of player that Booker and Jackson played against. So we gotta say what's the truth. So you're talking about a guy that's gonna be a good NFL player in Zabel, and a guy that right now is gonna be a good player a lot faster when he walks in the room, and that's Jackson.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a good way to put it. We'll move back out. We got 3 more here. We got Aireontae, Ersery, tackle, Minnesota, which is, place near and dear to us. He is 58 on the consensus board. I'm a little higher than that, but Ersery was a longtime starter at the University of Minnesota. He played a lot of big games over there at Minnesota, played some top competition in the Big Ten, has a lot of starts. When you watched Ersery, he was a left tackle at Minnesota. What were some of your thoughts? Big tackle, a lot of zone scheme in that offense as well. But what do you think of Ersery?
This isn't, to be frank, this isn't my flavor right here. It's you got a big guy that bends at the waist, that doesn't sink his hips, doesn't finish great. He doesn't have that motor like he doesn't have the motor like Zabel has. Absolutely not. And he doesn't have the motor like some of the other guys we talked about previous. He does a little bit of watching at the end of plays. That would, pretty much drive me nuts. He gets narrow in the run game. I don't want to say I'm trying not to be a real line coach in this show for you, Nate, but I don't want to say he looked like Tarzan, play like Jane, but he for his size and for the amount of experience he has, I'd like to see him do a little bit better, to be frank with you.
Right. I'm a little more bullish on him than you, but I'm with you with some frustrations maybe I had with him was that he makes mistakes a guy that started 30-something college games shouldn't make in my eyes. A guy should be learning, especially if this is your last year. You're not some true junior. You're a redshirt senior. So I'm with you. And the when you say you use the term waist bending, and I know that sounds very literal, but maybe you speak to why that is a negative when you're watching, especially a bigger player.
Well, because you lose leverage. You should hit on the rise. You should hit on the rise, with a little bit of bend in your back. I'm trying to show it on this thing where people can see it. And not because you're a big, tall guy, hunch over. That's a waist bender. You can see it on the tape. Now, we talked about this before, you and I, Nate. Sometimes that has to do with being a really big man playing against really small players. And you tend to develop bad habits because you're playing against littler guys, so you kind of bend at the waist and you kind of throw them around a little bit. But now when you're playing against real men your size, you got to be able to play with leverage, Nate. And so this young man doesn't consistently plays with leverage. I have down he's a grabber, not a puncher. I have down he's a wrestler, which means he stops his feet. Anytime I make a comment, he's a wrestler. That means that he's stopping his feet and he's just trying to hold the guy away from the ball. That's that motor thing, that's that finish, that grit.
Firing your feet.
That my guy is not going to hit the ball carrier because the ball carrier is my buddy, and I don't want my guy punching my buddy in the mouth. So you have to play with that attitude. I don't see that on tape.
And you said too, before we were talking about him, kind of maybe plays to his competition level as well. You were talking about maybe playing smaller guys, but even just if he plays more talented competition, you saw his game rise a little bit. And how do you kind of take that? I've heard you talk about other players anecdotally in the past about that, and you've kind of maybe, I would say painted as a negative, but maybe kind of squint your eyes a little bit at that.
Well, I thought my comments were when he played Penn State, against Carter, who's an elite player, maybe the first player picked in the draft. Who knows? But let me say, besides the quarterback, let me say this: he had a better motor against Carter, and I think part of that is I don't know if he gets bored playing against players that aren't that great, or he just doesn't seem to feel like he needs to give it his all. But whatever the reason is that his motor went up against a better player, that has to change. He has to give that consistent effort, that consistent grit of your teeth every week, not just when he's playing against great players. And in the National Football League, he's going to play a great player almost every weekend.
Every week. Yeah. It's not just consistent for one day. It's 17 games, 18 weeks. And then can you do it again the next year? And then can you do it again the next year? That's what it is about consistency and consistently finishing. So I'm glad we talked about him a little bit because maybe I've been jaded or rose-colored glasses maybe because I watched him against the better competition and they rose up against that. And I agree with you that some of the finish stuff is something I've been a little iffy on. But we're actually going to go on to a guy, another Big Ten offensive lineman, kind of a guy really hasn't gotten a ton of hype. He's kind of just stayed in this area. He's 61 on the consensus board. I think people just don't know what to do with him. This is Marcus Mbow from Purdue, who played tackle for Purdue. I project as a guard, and I would want to talk to you about that. But what do you think of Mbow? Would you think of him as a guard or project him as a guard as well? And maybe talk about just like his athleticism and maybe the technique that he plays with as well.
Well, I am a big fan of this player. You could win a lot of games with a player like this. And the number one reason is he's of all the guys that I'm looking at on the board, the 11 guys that you gave me to do, if he doesn't have the best motor, then he's got the second or third best motor because this guy, he's running down the field when he thinks there's a turnover. He's illegally tackling guys that he thinks might have intercepted a pass. He's finishing in the run game. He's out in the open running. He does a nice job of pulling. He's not a tackle. He's not an NFL tackle. He did a nice job at Purdue. I'd like to see him move inside to left guard myself, actually. But you talk about transition over to center. This guy has the athletic attributes, the quickness, the change of direction, the short area suddenness that he could possibly move into center. I like this player. I think this is a good football player that can help you win football games.
Yeah, he's 32 on my big board. I'm in agreement with you. Why left guard, maybe not right guard for people listening?
Well, most teams have right-handed quarterbacks. Most teams are right-handed, and most teams pull the backside guard. And if you're a right-handed football team, you're going to pull the backside guard, and
yep.
That would be why. But either way, inside, I think that's going to be the place for him. I mean, he's not tiny. He's 302 pounds. He's got good size. I like the way this kid plays. I like the way this kid plays. And Zabel plays, they play similar. For me, they're similar players.
Yeah. And you use the word active hands and just active players. Like they're trying to find ways to get leverage, try to find ways to win. No, I think he's an easy mover. Like I've just been a fan. I think maybe some people were scared off because he was just over 300. How does he hold up against bull rushes? Yada, yada. You don't think that's much of an issue because he's so active, right?
Yeah. So you got two guys of the 11 that we talked about that have elite finish and elite flying around, and my guy is not going to hit the ball carrier. Those two guys, you could see that, and you could sense it on film with Zabel and with what's that he said last time? Mbow.
Mbow.
These two guys have the similar motor, and there's a lot of good offensive linemen that I have coached or that have played the National Football League, and their top, one of their top traits was motor. And this guy, this player has that motor, in my opinion.
That's great. I'm glad you like him, because now I don't feel so crazy on it. And the last guy we're going to end up on is a plays tackle, played both sides in college. I think we both look at him as a guard. That is Jonah Savaiinaea from Arizona. He is 69 on the consensus board. He is in my 40s on my big board. You'll hear why. Maybe I might be lowering that one down. But Jonah actually was coached by a mutual friend of ours. That is Josh Oglesby, who I played with at the University of Wisconsin. And he is actually bigger than my dad. And my dad right here, if anyone's watching this, can see he's a large human. Josh is bigger than my dad. He was a highly recruited guy at tackle for Wisconsin, but now he's a great offensive line coach. Coached this guy in Arizona. I had to give out a shout out to Josh. But when you watch Jonah, what'd you think of him? You look at him as a guard as well, and maybe some of his blemishes and strengths.
Yeah, this is a very large man. Reminds me a lot of Dave Dixon. I thought Dave was probably old Minnesota guard. Dave probably had a little bit more suddenness. I know that Dave could run. We pulled Dave a lot. This guy tested well, but he doesn't play to me the way he tested. There's a clock issue, and the clock issue is this guy is not a great finisher. His defender is in the play quite often. And for me to see a player, the guy he's supposed to keep away from the ball carrier or the quarterback or whoever has the ball, and his guy is constantly in the play, that's not a good trait.
Right. And I think it's one where his first movement, you could see the athleticism, but I think you mentioned too, we were talking before, he's not able to react to movement very well. And so maybe that testing doesn't always show up. And can you maybe speak to that about staying balanced? What do you kind of not even just look for? Is that teachable? A guy climbing to the second level, or staying balanced, or staying within his phone booth and making the block or anything like that?
Yeah. So he has some issues redirecting on a second level. Does a nice job. He's big, shoving that down. But when he climbs up to the second level, those athletes that are much better athletes than us bigger guys move. And he's constantly, at least in the 2 games I watched, he's consistently not only missing that guy, but he's also ending up on the ground, which tells me he's not bringing his feet with him. He's just reaching. So, yeah, I see this player as an inside player. I think he's going to be pretty doggone good because of the space he can take up in pass protection. He'll be a good zone guy. But, there's a couple of plays of him pulling out in space, and he looks okay. But there are some things that we can help this player get better at. And the number one thing would be just to entrench in his brain, hey, you got to finish on your guy. Your guy can't consistently hit our guy that has the ball.
Would you be comfortable taking him in round 2, or would you think he's more of a round 3 type?
That's a great question. He has that playing tackle, so that's always something you have to take into consideration. But certainly I wouldn't see this player at the top of the 2nd round.
Okay. No, that's a good way to put it. That's kind of, where I have him rated at. Dad, thank you so much. So you said you have the whole big board laid out, or maybe your stack laid out. So if I'm off the top of my head, I believe it's Conerly, then Simmons. Then Mbow from Mizzou.
No, okay. I would say, I'm going to give it to Nate. I would say perfect. Conerly. I would say Conerly. Let's say Simmons didn't get hurt. I would say Simmons. I would say Banks because of the tackle ability and the left side ability. I would say Membou. Mm-hmm. I would say Campbell. I would say Jackson. Okay. Then I would say kind
of Zabel, Booker, kind of.
I would say Booker because he's going to fit in some system. I like Zabel, and of course I'm a fan of Mbow's, and I'm not a fan of Ersery's, but that doesn't mean that he can't be a good player in the National Football League. He just needs to have a little bit of a brain change of how he looks at things and how he.
Hey, Bob, guys.
Well, look, Nate. The players are what we emphasize. When I look at tape and I see players walk into the football, that's not being emphasized that they finish to the ball. So to me, that's not so much on the player that it is, and I'm not calling any coaches out, but I just know that I did it for a long time. I know that players that are finishing to the football are taught to finish to the football, whether that was in high school or whether that's their college coach. That's called, just great desire and just watching out for your buddy. When I see players walking to the ball carrier on film, turns me off.
Yeah, no, I mean, competitiveness and toughness are huge traits that a lot of teams look at. I mean, every team I've been with, too, looked at those things and rated those things along with athleticism. And, I do think that sometimes I try to gauge it, too. Like, hey, they just ran a 14-play drive, all no huddle, all RPOs where they had to move and do a bunch of stuff, even though the play was away from them. So I try to always gauge that, but it is worth mentioning. A finish, guys on the ground is something that you always talk about too, and that's maybe more about athleticism and balance. But that's something I've even kind of regurgitated on this show, and something I always look at. Maybe I'll be lower on some guys because they end up on the ground. I actually think this class has a lot of guys that aren't on the ground a lot, which I think just kind of speaks to the athleticism of this group.
Yeah, there's only the one kid that we talked about that was on the ground quite a bit. And it wasn't he was on the ground once. He was on the ground multiple times and always on the same type of movement, too. So, that's something you can drill and help him with his feet and his vision and seeing that second level player a little earlier, not getting like, it's almost like, oh, I didn't expect you to be there so quick. So it's something you can work on for the player. It doesn't mean that he can't play. It's something he has to fix, though, if he's going to play at a high level.
Especially if you want to start him early, and that's what you're hoping to do with the day 2 guy. But, Dad, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. First time I've ever interviewed you. for anything. Hopefully it wasn't weird for some people when we have the same talking cadence, even though you just have a thick New York accent and I got some neutral kind of Minnesotan accent. So hopefully it's not too jarring for anyone listening. But thank you so much for joining me, Dad. You can find my dad on Twitter at Mike Tice 86. He also has the Mike Tice Foundation, which is his charity event. It is in the Seattle area, happening in July. I'm sure he'll have some links for everything. We have some bidding items coming up, so make sure to check that out as well. But I am Nate Tice. You can find me at Nate_Tice on Twitter, Nate Tice on Blue Sky. We'll be back on Monday with some more defensive prospects with Chuck. And also, make sure to send in those mailbag questions, football301mailbag at yahoosports.com, or leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us, follow us, rate us, do all that good stuff. Watch us on YouTube, on the Yahoo Sports YouTube channel. You can, listen to this and check it out on YouTube so you can see the visuals of my dad and ruffling his papers and going through his list and see the cool background that he has. But thank you to everyone behind the scenes. Dad, thank you so much for joining me. Love you. I'll see you probably pretty soon. probably very soon.
Are you coming over for dinner tomorrow? What day is this coming out?
This will come out in a few hours. This will come out Thursday. So I might see you for dinner. I might see you at dinner tomorrow. I'll text you a little bit later. But thank you to everyone for listening. Thanks to my dad. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes. See you guys next time.